Welcome to another episode of Housing Matters. As always, I'm your host, Corey Jalseth. My location today is District 26 on the Kitsap Peninsula, or more specifically, the city of Gig Harbor. I sat down with State Representative Michelle Caldier, who is currently running for the state Senate seat in District 26. We had a great conversation covering housing, taxes, the changes in the district since she has been a representative for the last 11 years, as well as many other topics. Enjoy. Well, State Representative Michelle Caldier and soon to be Senator Michelle Caldier, thank you very much for joining Housing Matters. It's a great honor and privilege to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
I usually like to start out by having our guests tell us a little bit about themselves and kind of how they chose to run for elected office.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in my district, and I've only lived in Washington State. Prior to joining the legislature, I was a nursing home dentist, and in 2013, the state legislature cut adult dental Medicaid, which, by the way, at the time was all controlled by Democrats. And so they cut adult dental Medicaid. I didn't understand why they would include the nursing home population with that. Like, I think if you were going to cut the program for able-bodied citizens, but at least allow some sort of funding for that population. So I came down to Olympia, made some friends, and they said, you should run for office. And I was like, I don't think I'm qualified. I'm only a dentist. And so that was my journey, and here I am now, 11 years later. So
that's funny. That's generally kind of the response is like, well, I was fed up with something that I was seeing, and I wanted to change it, and then I realized, hey, I like doing this, and I like supporting the people around me. So yeah. And you spoke a little bit about your dental career just now. Can you talk a little bit about your passion helping locally and overseas, and some of the work that you've done with that?
Oh yeah. Well, I was in foster care when I was younger, and when I became a dentist, I knew I wanted to give back. I knew what it felt like to, have. I had rampant decay as a kid. I spent a lot of time in the dental office, and I had a skill that I wanted to give back. So I did dental care in Honduras, Jamaica. And then also donated about $1 million of care just with my nursing home population after they cut adult dental Medicaid. And while I was taking a lot of the Medicaid patients, I donated a lot of care. So, I've just always wanted to give back.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's at the level of service. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And refresh my memory. How long have you been a representative for District 26?
It's been 11 years. So I just finished my 11th term, and it's I will tell you, every year is different, and this was probably the hardest year of all. So, yeah.
But safe to say that you're pretty popular. They keep having you back. So,
yes, I'm very, very grateful to my community.
So running for the Senate seat now, but being one of now 3 districts, it used to just be 2, but 3 districts in the entire state with dual party representation. How has that been working with Democratic colleagues as your district has kind of moved and changed over the years?
It's been a little challenging. Mm-hmm. I will say that, like with Emily Randall, who is now moved on to Congress, mm-hmm. Her and I were very different on our political views. Yeah. And so, every year we would come together and she'd say, these are the bills I'm sponsoring. And I'd say, there's no way I can support those. And then I'd tell her what I'm doing, and she might support some. And, because most of the stuff that was more bipartisan that I would put forward.
Sure.
And then we'd say, okay, well, let's focus on like capital budget projects, mm-hmm. and transportation projects and what we can bring back to the community. So we did a very good job of that. Mm. But when I came in, it was all Republican, and that was a lot nicer.
So you are the assistant ranking member on Healthcare and Wellness Committee, mm-hmm. obviously with your extensive background. Can you talk about some of the legislation that your committee was able to work on this session, and kind of what came out of that you were excited about?
So probably some of the more intensive work with healthcare was done on the appropriation side, mm-hmm. just because it had to do more with like the Medicaid funding. So what a lot of people don't realize is that when the budgets were released, what the cuts were. Because I know a lot of people like to blame Trump and say, "Oh, Trump's cutting Medicaid," but the reality of it is that the Democrats also cut Medicaid.
Yeah.
And the first proposals were to freeze nursing home care rates for 6 entire years. So if the state budget was frozen for 6 years, it would be like 2/3 of what we spent, right? So,
Wow. Okay.
so if you look at the nursing home world, their profit margins are very, very low.
Yeah.
Like, as minimum wage goes up, they have to pay their staff more. They have so many rules and regulations that are put on that industry, even more than
Insurance,
the housing
yeah,
industry.
sure.
And they would wind up closing. And so then one of the other proposals was cutting Medicaid for nursing moms. So a lot of the things that happen in healthcare were also with the Appropriations Committee, and I serve on both of those. So
Okay, yeah. So given you're on the Appropriations Committee, you spoke a little bit to that, but the budget as a whole this year,
Yes.
I'll just let you go. What do you think of?
Oh my gosh, it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
So frustrating because, I always look at the budget as, we're spending people's tax dollars, right? So you have to ask yourself, is this what the people would want their money spent on?
Sure.
Right? And I think everybody can agree that you need to pay some sort of taxes. And we need to have some form of government. We need to make sure we have functioning roads. We need to make sure that we have safety net for the community.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that the average person would not want to pay for laser hair therapy for transgendered individuals in the prison system. And that was never, and boob jobs that was never on the cutting block. Like, and it bothered me that you would rather cut Medicaid for mothers who just gave birth. You would rather freeze nursing home rates and make it so that people, as they were aging, because we're having this huge silver tsunami coming. I mean, if those nursing homes close, we have nowhere to put people, right? And there were all of these things that they proposed that I don't think that that's what the public would have wanted. And so, I mean, I feel like the Republicans did a fantastic job of being united. We knew that there was a very good chance that the Democrats would gain supermajorities in both the House and Senate this last election. So one of the things that the House Republican floor team did was that they hired a parliamentarian so that we could look at all the avenues so that our floor action was done as well as possible. And I have to say that for being in a super minority, we kicked butt. And I was pretty proud of ourselves because we were able to stop a lot of bad things. I mean, as much as that got through, we actually did a really good job of being united. And we saw a lot of the Democrats fighting each other, and we're seeing it now play out in the election. So it's very interesting.
There's definitely still some infighting there, and people running against their own party, and disagreements on, well, you're too moderate, or
right, you're not liberal enough.
Right, you didn't agree with us on all
every
these things.
you were not lockstep with us. Right. Therefore, you're not a real Democrat.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but that's not. I don't think that that's what people want.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, if you agreed, and I've had issues with my own party, and I've always believed if you agreed lockstep with everything that your leadership wanted or everything that your party wanted, you're not doing any critical thinking yourself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because it's like you want every person in there to be independent thinkers.
Yes.
And to me, I feel like you get the best legislation coming out from people who can speak their mind, work together, and collaborate. And right now, that's not the environment we have.
Well, and as you said, representing your district too. Obviously, districts all have different needs and wants, and so if you're just going to walk in there and just be another yes vote next to something, then
exactly. And that's the thing is, like, for our district, it's 40% Democrat, 40% Republican, and 20% independent. So I've always said that if I just went off of, one small section of the district, I'm not doing my job.
Right.
I have to listen to everybody, and I have to come up with my own, result of, the input that I get from the community.
Absolutely, yeah. We were talking about Medicaid stuff and your fight with that in the past. On the just for a brief minute, on the federal level, with some of the funding changes there, are you concerned with how that's going to affect Washington? And I know there's been a few things introduced as maybe like kind of a stopgap, but what are your thoughts on all that?
So I'm still trying to truly figure out what passed, because the hard part is that sometimes you can't necessarily rely on the media's reporting of everything. Yeah. And I do know that when the first, what first passed out of the House was a cut to the expanded Medicaid program. So when the Affordable Care Act passed, that they encouraged states to increase the Medicaid amount from 100% federal poverty level to, I believe it was like 128%
sounds right,
federal poverty level. And the incentive was that the feds were going to give a 90% match. So for every $1 we spent, they matched it for $9. So the original, and originally that was supposed to go back to 50%. It was never politically popular, so no administration had ever done it.
Sure.
And then the proposal was to take it back to a 2/3. So for every $1 we spend, it would be $2 for Medicaid, and that would have resulted in a budgetary shortfall of about $6 billion for our state. Then on top of that, there's also cuts with Planned Parenthood, which the governor has already said, "Oh my gosh, we've got to backfill that." And then I know that there's cuts for immigrant care, and then there's also requirements for able-bodied individuals. The concern that I have with the able-bodied individuals is that I think probably the biggest concern is that any time that the government tries to implement a program, there's they make mistakes.
No, never. Yeah.
And so my it's kind of like, when way back in 2013 when they just said, "Oh, we're just going to cut adult dental Medicaid," and it's like, well, what about the nursing home folks, right? Yeah. So my biggest concern is that we're going to have issues with some of our most vulnerable getting kicked off that shouldn't be kicked off. And quite honestly, I think we have a large segment of our population that has been so used to not working and getting services, and I think it's going to be very hard to get them back to work.
And in any sort of meaningful way, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll jump to housing now on the state level. 1217, the rent control bill. I have some thoughts, but I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I used to be the ranking for housing in the House
last couple of years, right?
Yeah. Okay. And I was the one who negotiated the eviction moratorium and then we killed rent control then. The hard part is that a lot of people who are renters, I think that they think that this is going to be the silver bullet that fixes all of their problems. Right. But it's not. And what I'm afraid of is, and I think that this is what we're going to find, is that building developers, because we need what is it, like 1 million new housing
within the next
units.
10 years or so. Yeah.
And my concern is that we're not going to have building developers develop in our state, and we're not going to meet that goal. And then the other concern that I have, and same thing with the eviction moratorium, where they said, "Oh my gosh, what if someone lost their job from COVID, and we need to protect these people because what we heard over and over again was those evil landlords are the number one cause of homelessness." And I'm like, I thought they were the ones providing housing to renters, and that you have to have some sort of protections for both, both
Absolutely.
sides. You have to have protections for the tenant, and you also need to have fair protections for the landlord, because if a landlord has somebody in there that either is causing problems to other people that are dangerous, that are, or they're not paying their rent.
Yeah.
And that's what we found was that, I had phone call after phone call from people, and they said, I have a mortgage on that property. Like, I'm going to have to go bankrupt. I'm going to have to foreclose on that home. And what can you do to help? And I think that when you have some people and their philosophy is only to protect one side and not thinking of the other side, that's where we get these issues. And I think the housing problem is going to get worse. I think that that the people out there, like the Michelles of the world that have great credit and and no criminal background or no issues, that people like me are always going to be able to rent if I wanted to, right? But the Michelle, when the 19-year-old Michelle that was working at Kentucky Fried Chicken that, had no, I had no rental, very little rental history, very little credit history. Those are the people that we're going to leave in the dust, and they claim that that's who they're helping, and they're not.
Yeah, it makes it tougher to take a risk on somebody or take a chance. And I always like a line that Representative Andrew Barkus always says: you can't have housing without housing providers. And so if they're pushing all these people away, who's going to do it? And you look at the eviction numbers ticking up in the state this year as well. It's not the mom and pop people filing the eviction rates. It's all the not-for-profit people who can't.
They can't make the numbers work.
They can't make the numbers work.
And that's the messed up part, is that they criticize the private industry, but yet the government does it 10 times worse. So, you know what I mean? And I'm just, I saw the whole thing with the socialized grocery store too, right? Where they're like, oh my gosh, how did this not work? And it's like, well, the profit margins for the grocers are like 1%, and it just so happens that if you don't have protections in place, people, that all of these other issues happen. And I don't know if I know you have, but like one of the other frustrating pieces is they're having, I think it's like the city of Olympia and stuff like that. They're, and I know that there was just this whole work group on, how to protect tenants even more, right?
Yes.
By not doing any background checks on, people who are, what do they call it? Like credit disadvantaged.
I believe that's the official term. Yes.
And having a criminal history, and I heard from several lawmakers on the opposite side of the aisle that a lot of these restrictions around, serious criminals, that it prevents them from having a place to live, and that we're discriminating against them. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but if you got, if you're a pedophile, I'm going to continue to discriminate against you, because that's just I'm one of those people that discriminate because those crimes sometimes repeat themselves, and we're not putting protections in place to protect the people,
Yeah, well, especially if you talk about the pedophile area, families living in a building and things like that.
And they've got their kids there. And and that's the thing, is that a responsible landlord is supposed to protect all of the tenants, not just one of the tenants, and that's the part that, bless their hearts, but there's a faction in Olympia that I don't think that they're ever going to come to that conclusion.
It's we're seeing this crop up in Seattle, especially, I would say, as well, because really being a sex offender is kind of the only crime, so to speak, or criminal background that they're allowed to consider whatsoever in screening a tenant, and so they're ending up with multifamily and duplex, things like that too, but buildings where maybe somebody comes into the premises with the roommate ordinance that they have, and they don't know anything about this person. They're not on the lease, and all of a sudden they might own a triplex, and there's somebody with a criminal background of some kind, and then there's a family that lives right next door, and they obviously feel responsible for the safety of those residents, and there's not a whole lot they can instantaneously do about it. They may be able to do something that's going to take them 9 or 12 months possibly, but it makes it extremely challenging and expensive. And so when we talk about our membership, the smaller providers, I don't know how you just float that. If you can't. If you have a big building with 200 units or something, and there's that's obviously still unfortunate. But if you can
hit that cost, you can assume that cost a little bit better than if you just have a couple units.
You've got the cash flow, so to speak. So I had to bring this up, and there's two actually. When I edit this, I will play these over us speaking right now. But there's two great clips during various housing bill hearings on the floor. One with Representative Strom Peterson speaking about all the work that has been done for housing supply, and you're just shaking your head in the background like, absolutely not.
I didn't realize that I did it until all of you have lobbyists that are watching everything, and they told me, and they were like, Michelle, you were just shaking your head, and I was like, it's so frustrating because, sometimes people are not telling the full truth on their floor speeches, and housing is something I'm very passionate about, and sometimes the head just starts shaking. And I'm just like, that is not what just happened.
It's wonderful, just coincidental camera placement in there, by the TVW guys. But because then there's another one where Representative Sam Lowe is up basically talking about how the bill is going to do the exact opposite as we were just discussing, and you're like his cheer squad back there. You're just nodding your head vigorously like a "you go" kind of thing. I was watching that hearing live, and a couple other guys in the office, and we just started laughing, just like look at her back there. She's cheer squad back there.
Heck yeah! Well, because Sam took over for the and I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is because on the committee, the Democrats stacked the deck. So when I was on it, there was 6 Democrats and only 3 Republicans. So us 3 Republicans had to work twice as hard, if not harder, on every single little thing. And I got put in that position, and and housing's not my background, so I had to spend a long time, learning the details and the ins and outs, and I know how hard that is, and so I'm just like, oh yeah.
let them have it. Yeah. Since the passage of the rent control bill, have you had any input from housing providers or developers or anything in your district, and kind of what their thoughts are going forward?
The housing providers are very frustrated, and I've heard from a number of developers that they're looking elsewhere other than our state to build. And the thing is it's not just one thing.
Right.
Like if it was really easy to find labor and you know what I mean, because the labor's so expensive. And if all of your numbers matched up otherwise, and then they just did rent control, that would be one thing. But it was like, you have to understand, there has been a full-on assault to this industry. I mean, since I've been there, but I would say especially the last 8 years. And so it's like layer upon layer upon layer. And then the other piece is that not only what we do on the state level, but then you have local jurisdictions. Like you look at Tacoma. I mean, if someone gave someone a late fee greater than $10, then the tenant can sue the landlord for a month's worth of rent, even if it's $1 more. And so you have to sit there and go, okay, well, if they did build, right, like who's going to want to manage the property?
Right.
And that's the problem. And you have so many people who are in the legislature who have only signed the back of the check, never the front of the check.
Yeah.
They've worked in government their whole life. They don't understand how hard it is to make all the numbers work. And at the end of the day, if there's no profit margin,
Yeah.
like, why on earth would they build and take that risk in our state? Because that's a huge amount of risk.
Yes.
And that's the part they're like, oh, we don't want them to have a profit. And it's like, okay, well, if they don't have then what's the incentive for them to build?
Right.
Because they love our state. And so, you know what I mean? And even all of your government ran ones, those are also failing, right? And so it's like you can't even make the numbers work.
No.
And that's the part that I don't get.
Yeah, the non-for-profit people too, they are, I mean, you look at like the lending dollars and all that, and nobody wants to lend them money to build more. Because, you know, they look at the books and you're like, you're not getting rent from 45% of your residents as is. How is that going to, like, how is that working out?
How do you pencil it out?
Right, we're not lending you money on anything like that. And then, you know, you have to talk about the permitting process and like just the amount of time between.
Everything.
Right. It makes it tough. And I'm glad you brought up Tacoma, because Tacoma, which a lot of people always think, oh, Seattle is, you know, the worst. Tacoma has the most onerous rental policies in the entire state. And when they say things like, oh, that's not going to happen. My parents have been housing providers in Tacoma for 35 years. And as soon as Measure 1 went into effect, they immediately had a tenant who said that he was going to stop paying rent, and he knew perfectly well
how long it would
take to do something. It was like, well, you're not going to be able to do anything until it would have been June, I guess, for him. And in the meantime, trash the place. And, you know, for the most part, my parents have always done the work. I've helped as I grew up, and they've had some of these homes for almost 30 years. And so he's out, you know, they're out the rent, and then he goes and has to spend a couple of weekends revamping the whole place and spend the money on the materials and all the rest. And you know, they've been members of the community for years, you know, Rotary, volunteering, all this kind of stuff. And it's like to say that doesn't happen to, you know, very good contributing members of your community, and people would never do that. So one more housing policy that I did want to bring up, we're talking on housing, and currently it's not directly tied to housing, but it is the newly passed B&O tax on self-storage and, you know, you think U-Haul and all that kind of stuff. And in the current form that it's in, it's just a tax on that kind of stuff, which is interesting to me too, because the majority of people who use storage units are maybe people who have less space in their living environment. So maybe they're military while they're moving and all that. And so it seems to me that they're just taxing those folks. But the thought is, I mean, they're of course not going to stop there. I mean, it's eventually going to try to come to housing, other commercial properties, I would imagine. So.
Oh yeah, no, they already there's already talk of that floating around. Yeah. So just so you know that there is a palette in the legislature. There is. I don't think there's a tax they didn't like. I mean, seriously, like they sit there and they say, oh, we don't like regressive taxes, and it's like. But you increase the sales tax and you increase the gas tax, you increase the ferry fares, you increase the tolls, all of these regressive taxes that you claim you dislike, you know, and quite honestly, a B&O tax is a regressive business tax. Yeah. It goes right off the top. It doesn't factor in what your profit margin is, and I think that's the frustrating thing is they talk from both, you know, sides of their mouth and. And I mean, I'm sorry, but if they could get their hands on a B&O tax for rental income, do you know how much money that is? Do you know how many great programs that could fund? Yeah. And it would just be a screw you to all of the landlords that they dislike. And quite honestly, it's like, if you think about it, if they've got a rent cap, then there's only, you know, that comes directly off of the landlord, because typically you pass that on to, you know, like when a business gets a B&O tax, they pass it on
as business goes,
to the consumers, right? So this would definitely hit the landlords the hardest. And I know there's a lot of local jurisdictions where they've started making, or proposing to have landlords register as a rental unit.
Yes.
So the thing is everything, being there for 11 years, I've seen how the incremental change happens. So first it's just a little bit here, and then it's just, it's just a B&O tax on the storage units. Don't worry, don't worry. We're just making you we just want you to register the unit.
Right.
We don't, we're not going to tell you why we want you to register the unit, but just in case, I think it's for safety somehow, some way, and then all of a sudden, it's the smaller local jurisdictions they are also hungry for money too,
yep.
and that's it's like the nose in the camel's tent, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again in our state, and I was very vocal against the storage tax, and because I represent Bremerton, which is a military base.
Yep.
There are some storage units where it's pretty much all the military, and honestly, that they're the ones that can afford it the least. But at the end of the day, I have learned that there are many legislators who claim that they care about the poor, and their actions speak louder than their words. So,
well, and you mentioned earlier too, I think between the Senate and the House, I think on the Democratic side of the aisle, I believe there's only two business owners, two people who have ever had to kind of go through that whole process from their
Senate. Who do you have? Are Democrats?
I'm thinking Senator Amy Wallen.
Yep.
Oh, it's soon to be Senator Amy Wallen, representative currently, and then.
Because I know Strom Peterson had a business and he had to close it.
Okay. Oh, okay. So experience at least there, I
right.
guess. Yeah.
I were maybe not a successful business owner, but you would think that experience would make him more, sympathetic, but it's not.
And then you had Senator Mark Mullet, who obviously is
right. So he's gone. So
he's now gone, but
which is sad.
Yeah.
So they have supermajorities, and right now that I can think of, and I might be missing somebody. I do believe there's only one business owner.
Yeah.
That's
tough.
Sad.
That's tough.
And the sad part is she gets treated horribly by that caucus because she is a business owner.
Yeah.
And and I think.
And a bookkeeper, the CFO of said business.
And that's the thing is it's like, in the way that I always view everything, right? In every society, you are always going to have people who are more vulnerable. You're always going to have people who are disabled. You're always going to have the elderly and kids that you have to help protect, right? And you need people who are producers in that society to generate the income to pay for the help for the most vulnerable. Sure. And our state has done a horrific job of pushing out all of the producers and making them not want to be here and moving them outside of our state. Yeah. And yet opening up our arms to all the most vulnerable. And it's like, it's kind of backwards. I mean, and I don't get it. And I'm grateful with my talks that I've had with Amy Wallen that I think she gets it, but unfortunately the number of people in that side of the aisle is fewer and farther between. There's a few more that I think understand, but
maybe aren't as vocal about it, perhaps. Yeah.
But the hard part is if you're vocal about it, you don't get treated nicely, and which is backwards also. Yeah. So
because as we were talking earlier, it's like we're there to represent your district, not just be the yes checkbox, right? So that is a perfect segue into talking about your campaign for the Senate. I want to just give you a few just riff and tell everybody why you're running for Senate.
So what a lot of people may not realize is that this year's a special election. So typically the term for a House seat is 2 years and a term for the Senate seat is 4 years. So in the 26th legislative district, which goes from West Bremerton, Port Orchard, Key Peninsula, and Gig Harbor and Fox Island. So in our district, the senator who was there, who is Emily Randall, she won her bid to Congress last year, and in all these other states, so for example, there's the 5th district, and then there's also the 48th. There's only a couple elections legislatively that are going on across the state. But what happens is that with that vacancy, that whatever party that person was in, so the Democrats appointed somebody to fill her spot. I call her the placeholder for me, and so she was in session this year and then has to run, so that is my opponent. And I announced before they picked it, so I was running regardless, and so I've done everything I could in February. So in January session started. I announced in I think it was late November.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then beginning of January, I got clearance from ethics as to what we could do to campaign. And beginning of February, we had doorbelling teams out in the district. I would come back every weekend. So we have now hit 30,000 doors in the district, which is huge. And that's the thing is I've ran so many tough contested elections because it's a swing district, so we get beat up regardless.
Those times they're pretty razor thin sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Emily, just so people know, Emily Randall, who won her bid to Congress, when she won the seat, it was only 104 votes out of over 70,000. So that's a swing district race. So it attracts all that outside dollars because they can influence people's vote and they can say whatever they want. They can say, you eat children for breakfast. It doesn't matter. There's no ethical stuff. You can say whatever you want. But we've been out there fighting. The election is August 5th. And right now we've got phone bankers working around the clock and trying to get people to turn in their ballots. Right now, the Democrats, they always turn in their ballots early in our district. And so we're struggling to make sure we get all the Republicans to turn in their ballots too, because they tend to vote for me. So far things are going well. I'm used to it. I feel like my back is still healing from all the knife wounds over the years, but
Well, and I mean, you just had to campaign for your house seat too. So I mean, it's just like right back into it. So and then you. I took a look at your campaign website, and obviously this is stuff that you've worked on in your time as a representative, but you wanted to really focus on inflation, public safety, new taxes, kind of educational improvements, things like that.
Well, repealing some of the new taxes. I know, I'm not running on more taxes. I'm actually running on being more fiscally responsible. And like I said before, the way that I look at a tax is if I think that that's what people would want to spend their money on. And, you look at like the homelessness stuff, right? And it's like, is the money actually going to do what it's supposed to do? So those are the things. And I've got the support of law enforcement. I've got I've got a number of fantastic endorsements because people know me, the business community knows me, things are rocking and rolling, and we're hoping for a good turnout on election night. So.
And if people want to either volunteer their time or contribute financially, where can they find your website?
It is michelleforsenate.com. So it is and it's with 2 L's. Okay, so MICHELLE and then the number 4 and senate.com. Yeah.
Had to swoop in and grab that address. That's an easy one to remember. So that's good.
Yes.
Yeah. Well. State Representative and soon-to-be State Senator Michelle Caldier, thank you so much for joining Housing Matters. I really appreciate our conversation and your time.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you're doing.
That's it for this episode of Housing Matters. Again, I want to thank my guest, State Representative Michelle Caldier, and thank you all for listening. As a reminder, we talked about this in our conversation, but District 26 is one of only 3 districts in the entire state that has bipartisan representation, and we really would love to see Representative Caldier assume that Senate seat. For all of your election information and coverage, stick with rhawa.org and keep an eye on your inboxes. We'll have all sorts of information. Our official general election voters guide will be coming out in September, as well as candidate profiles and other interviews. Thanks again for listening and joining me in beautiful Gig Harbor. If you have a story or topic you believe should be covered on a future episode of Housing Matters, send me an email at chjalseth@rhawa.org. I'd be happy to hear from you. The views expressed in episodes of RHAWA's Housing Matters podcast do not necessarily represent the views and policies of the Rental Housing Association of Washington. Formal legal advice and review is recommended prior to selection and use of this information. RHAWA does not represent your selection or execution of this information as appropriate for your specific circumstance. The material contained and represented herein, although obtained from reliable sources, is not considered legal advice or to be used as a substitution for legal counsel. Copyright 2025.